everyone. My name is Sharon Gaz, and I am Interim Director of Study Abroad at UWM's Center for International Education. And I'm here today with Dr. Chia Vang, who is Associate Vice Chancellor in the Division of Global Inclusion and Engagement. She's also a Professor of History. She is the founder and director of UWM's Hmong Diaspora Studies program. She is an internationally known expert on Hmong history, culture, and contemporary life. She has a decade of experience leading short-term study abroad programs in Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. And many of you may recognize her as the host of this summer's Campus Dialogue on Racial Justice series. So we're here today as part of our Education Abroad Week. And we've had this opportunity for students to learn a lot about our study abroad programs. And one thing we want to explore is how study abroad and international education in the broader context can be used as a tool to challenge racial and social injustice. And I know that certainly Dr. Vang has a wealth of knowledge that she will be able to share with us today, and I really look forward to our discussion. So in general, how would you say, or why would you say that international education now is more important than ever in challenging racial and social injustice?
Well, Sharon, thank you so much for inviting me to join you in this conversation. I think this is one of the things that are very close to my heart. And as you know, I keep saying that I'm the biggest advocate for study abroad. And maybe today is true because we're having this conversation. I'll answer your question in a bit, but I just want to say that I come from a place of having a lot of personal experiences with travel abroad, and then also my own, study abroad experience, and then leading, study abroad programs, as you mentioned. I think it just helps you to sort of think about yourself in a different way, and then also really think about the people and places that we sit in our classrooms and we learn about those people, right? But there is nothing that can compare to being in the midst, immersed in the different environments around the world. If we have an opportunity to do so, it can change us and how we view the world. And then as ambassadors of the United States, when we go abroad, right, we are representatives of the United States. It's not just our personal self, but how others see us. So I think it's these are things that are very close to my heart. I'm a big advocate, and I think that if we can make it an integral part of college education, I think it would be what I envision for our world. But in terms of your question about equity and racial justice is it has always been important, but I think maybe even more now than ever before. And as you and I know, the number of American students going abroad is not that high. And when you think about the number of students going to college, it's a very small percentage. And then if you look at the numbers, about less than 400,000 study abroad, right? And then you look at the statistics within that number of students who go abroad. First generation students from more marginalized communities or underrepresented groups, the number is even lower. So when you think about an equitable, education experience, I think international education is a place where we need to really work hard to make it accessible to students. Because if they don't have access, if students don't have access, right, the kinds of experiences, life-changing experiences that I have had, right, as a result of studying abroad, and many, many others who have had an experience, I think that's really an injustice to, to the students that come to our campuses. Because when you look at employers, they often give you a little more points. You've had interpersonal, intercultural experiences or international education. Some employers give you more points. So there's many spaces that are so beneficial. And as I said, these life-changing experiences, all kinds of studies have been done about how the impact of study international education has on a person's personal development, career development, and just their worldview. I think that most Americans that I have met, right, or have worked with, the ones who have been abroad, and I'm not criticizing many who have not had the opportunity to. I know there's some who don't want to go anywhere but in Wisconsin, right? And I'm not judging anyone, but I know that people who have had the opportunity to interact, live with, eat with, smile, cry with people who are very different from them have a different way to empathize with all kinds of issues. So that I hope that kind of answers your question, but I just think that, in terms of equity, it is instrumental. It is an instrumental part of, I think, what we do for students, and largely because I think when we talk about equity, it's about just and fair treatment, right? And equal, not equitable access to opportunities so that you can have better outcome for all, right? And not just for some who have privilege and, financial ability to do so. So I mean, this is really long answer to your question, but I feel like if and I want students to understand this, right? Sometimes when students meet me and I talk about all the places, all the 22 countries I've been to around the world, and spending a whole year in Paris as a junior in college, sometimes students say, "Oh, you must come from privilege. Your parents must have money," and all kinds of assumptions about, what I've been able to do. But if you look at my personal life and my family background, I would have not been likely to have the experiences that I've had abroad. But because I think that, where I went to college, because I had this intense desire to learn and just curiosity about all the things that I was reading about, right? I didn't want to just read about, Mont Saint Michel in France. I wanted to walk on it, and I wanted to walk in, all kinds of places that I read about, or run up the Great Wall of China. It's really, really important to be there. There's nothing better than interacting with people from these places. So I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question, but I think it's just, equity is so important right now than ever before.
I absolutely agree with you. And I know that that's something that we try to do our best to support students as much as we can. But there's always improvement that we can make in CIE. But I do think that right, those of us who have had the opportunity to go abroad, it really is a life-changing, transformational experience. And I think that, we can talk about the overarching benefits in terms of, learning about other cultures and, learning different languages, which is so key in my mind to learning about another culture. I really think that I think so many things can happen for students that they don't even anticipate in terms of, exploring their own identity when they go abroad. Being in a different place where, you might be visiting a country where people look different from you, and how does that feel to stand out when you're not a member of the majority? Me being a white American, I mean, that's certainly something that I experienced when I went abroad. I spent a semester as an undergrad in Mexico. And as a professional, I went on a short-term program to Ghana. And so those were incredibly transformational experiences for me. And, my impetus for studying abroad was to improve on my language abilities. And so that was something that I had saved for and I planned for and I knew that I was going to do. But I think that, I gained so much more than I even expected to. And I was in a city in Mexico that was a 6-hour bus ride from the United States. So it wasn't far,
Yes.
but yet being outside the US, it really can change your perspective incredibly. Incredibly.
Yeah, it does. And I just want to say that I am always thinking from abroad. And when I say that, I want to just acknowledge the fact that, I was born in Laos. My family became refugees. So we resettled in the United States. So the United States, where I grew up, is abroad, right? So I'm always thinking about life from abroad. And then my time in Paris for a whole year as a junior. And you're right, language is so important. And in that colonial history, I was really interested in learning about colonial history because that's where my family lived, the former French colonies. And the people who have power and privilege, they send their children to Paris for school, right? So even, when I grew up in the United States, um, my parents, we still had that kind of mentality. So when I started learning French in high school, I loved it. So English is my second language. French is my third language. I can do college level work. I had 4 years in high school and was so fascinated, wanted to go to France and study. And I knew that in high school, I've shared this story with some other friends too, but maybe I'll share with this group and others who might watch this too. I was taking French in high school and I loved it. And I wanted to go to France so much. So in my senior year, I love my French teacher, just this, white American woman, wonderful, right? Mrs. Ruley, bless her heart. And, I went to inner city school in St. Paul, Minnesota, right? Johnson High School. And she was a great teacher. She made me love Edith Piaf. For those of you who are older, who love French, you know who she is. Um, but when I was a senior, a group of us, in the French class, we said, Mrs. Ruley, can we do some fundraising? And can we go on, we read about, high school groups taking trips to France, right? I said, can we do that? Can we go? And you know what she said? She said, oh, you kids couldn't afford it. And I knew where she was coming from, right? I knew she was right. We couldn't afford it for who we are, right? In that environment. But the worst part was that, she was right. But I decided that, okay, that's fine. This group of students, we are not going to go to France, but I will go, right? I will go. And so, like you, I started preparing French language. When I get to college, I tested to third year French, in college. And then as a freshman, I just loved it and took all kinds of classes. And then by the time I was in France, I went to the University of Paris for one semester, the Sorbonne. And then I went to the University of Nantes for one semester. And I was taking regular classes at the university. And it's a different kind of experience when you are completely immersed like that than some of the programs that I have led where I'm teaching the class and there's no language requirement because I'm teaching the class abroad. So I just want to say that it really makes you think about who you are, right? I mean, those of us who have studied abroad, I feel like the students, many of the students that have gone on our program here at UWM that you and I have worked on, many are, they have to get a passport for the first time. And that's like the learning. I keep saying this over and over again, but the learning isn't just when you get to the villages in Laos or stopping at the airport in Tokyo or spending time in a coffee or a French bakery in Hanoi. Those are all really wonderful experiences too. But students having to go apply for a passport, I mean, that's a part of their identity, what it means to be an American, the ability to travel to many places that some people in some countries have a difficult time when we are going through the lines in certain places in customs, right? If you're an American citizen, there's certain privileges you have, but certain spaces you don't have that kind of privilege. So it makes you really think about your personal role in the United States, in abroad, and what you can do to help others across the globe to see what America is about. So I think it's just really transformative. I think it's the word that I want to use. It really helps you to rethink what you think you know, and it helps to reduce assumptions that we have about the other, right? In all the places in thatched with homes and castles that I've been to, and people meeting in the street, it all comes down to that most people just want the same things in life. We're just human beings, all want, you know, the same basic needs, right? Shelter, food, opportunities for our kids, and safety. And that's what most people just want. And the young people that I meet all over the world and with the American students that I take abroad, for them to see that is really fundamental, and for them to see that, you know, they might be hanging out with college students in Vientiane, Laos, but they learn that, you know, they all kind of just want the same thing, you know. Okay, what's the latest, you know, cell phone that they need to buy? And so we're just, it breaks down barriers. It makes you, it humanizes all of us when we travel, that, you know, we're all really the same, because we want what is best for ourselves and for our family and for our communities and our world as well. So I think you study abroad, it makes you see people as human beings instead of numbers and those people over there and they're not like us, when in fact we are. And so until someone can tell me that they only need to breathe and they don't need to eat or drink, then we're all really the same, made from the same, you know, materials. And, you know, if we can just see each other as fellow human beings on this earth. And I think that's what international education has the potential to do for all of us.
I think absolutely. It's so transformational. Now I know that you have taken students to Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, and many of the students were heritage students. And can you talk a little bit about how the experience was for them to go to these countries?
Yeah, it's so when I began this program in 2009, it's kind of selfish, okay? It's kind of selfish because I teach about that part of the world, right? And I teach about American involvement in that part of the world. So I left the country when I was 8 years old. So I only had bits and pieces of memory of that part of the world, right? So when I became a professional, when I started teaching at UWM, you know, when we left, it was during this, you know, when refugees leave, it's not always the best condition, right? So I grew up in the United States. So very long story short, I grew up in the United States having this kind of internalized views about Southeast Asia, or Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia in particular, right? About the people that we had left behind, the evils of communism, and everything that's kind of internalized, conditioned for, you know, for the children, the trauma that our parents experienced kind of transferred into many of us too. So I had a lot of fears about that. But when I became a professor, I started teaching and learning more and more. I wanted to be there myself, right? So my first trip back to that part of the world was in 2007, before I started running the programs. I went to Vietnam as, you know, then our provost, Rita Chang, she had an opportunity to go with a group of Southeast Wisconsin professionals to Hanoi. But it was during graduation time and she couldn't go. So she said, Chia, would you go on behalf of UWM? So I said, of course I would go. So I went on that trip to Vietnam, and it, you know, getting off the airport, just looking around and all these things I've learned about or felt growing up about the evils of communism. And yes, there were tremendous challenges with, you know, communist practices, but that was in 2007. So when I went there, going through the airport, other my American colleagues just went through it. But for me, it was very intense emotionally. But I didn't really talk to people about it. But after I went to Vietnam and I started meeting people, I even met, you know, a couple of Hmong individuals who lived in Vietnam. I came back and I just decided, you know, how I can, you know, the role that I can play as an educator is really to help, you know, reduce that kind of animosity, that kinds of assumptions, the kinds of negative, you know, things that we have towards other people. So I wanted to practice it. I didn't want to just talk about it and give presentations and lectures about how important it is to have these kind of interpersonal relationships. And, you know, anyway, so when I offered the program in 2009, many heritage students, meaning the Southeast Asian American students, who are most Asian American students you see on our campus are actually, you know, either Hmong, Vietnamese, or Lao. This is, you know, Southeast Asians are the biggest, you know, groups of Asians in Wisconsin anyways. So our campus has, you know, it used to be over 800, but we're probably around the 600 to 700 students now on this campus. So that question is so wonderful, Sharon. So I wanted to do it for myself and for the students. So many heritage students, who may not have been born there, but their parents came from that part of the world. So even in the 2009 program, I had, non-Asian students who went on the program too, but the program had continued to be majority Asian American students and primarily Southeast Asian students. And it is wonderful. I think many of them, they're much younger than I am. They're second generation, some even third generation now. I'm 1.5, right? But they go and that again, using that word, it is a transformative experience for them. I have students have written, summaries and reflections, and seeing the places and people that they've only heard about from their parents or read about in books or in movies, it changes their worldviews tremendously for the heritage students. For the first time, they are a majority. In Wisconsin, we're always a racial minority, right? But there, they become part of the majority, and then the white and black students, they become for black and the sad part, this is very relevant to our conversation today too, Sharon, is that over the 10 years that I've run this program, I've only had one African American student who went on the program. Not that people didn't want to go, right? But I'm saying in terms of access and resources, I think we can do more. That I can do more, and then we can work together. We have to do more because sometimes students don't. Often say you don't know how to desire it if you've never seen it, right? So you can't even envision going to Southeast Asia for many students. So for the heritage students, it's eye-opening. It helps them to really reconnect with, even if they don't have family there. Many of the students do have family, and so I always allow them a day to go and stay with their family. And my very first program, I had a Lao American student. Actually, he was a Madison student. So our program is not only for UWM. We've had students from other campuses that have joined us. But he stayed with his uncle and aunts for a night, and his cousins came. And then I had another student, Shaw Lee or Donnie Lee, whose uncle was a top, Lao government official. And first he was afraid to go, or even he said, Dr. Van, can I just spend the day, say hello to them, and come back? I don't want to stay overnight. So I told them, you can choose, it's your uncle, it's your family, and your mom told me that, make sure you go stay with them because it will change your life. He was an American born young man, right? So he hesitated, and then he came back and talked to me again. And I said, tomorrow, I said, these are two ways you will feel tomorrow. If you don't stay with them tonight, tomorrow you'll say, I wonder what it would have been like, because we're going to go to another country after tomorrow. Or if you stay with them tonight, tomorrow you will say, wow, what a phenomenal experience. And he stayed with the family. He decided to stay with his uncle. They called all his cousins that he had never met. They all came to the house, and he had cousins around his age. And the next day he comes, oh, Dr. Ryan, thank you so much for helping me to make that decision, because my cousins came and we talked about all these things that I talk about with my family and friends in the United States. We talked about girls, we talked about sports and all these things. So it was so transformative for him, and he's been just one of the best students that have written to me about that experience for him. So heritage students overall, right, have really been emotional. We're in villages and towns that their parents came from, or they have aunts and uncles. One of the students in the 2011 program, Pang Her, she's a filmmaker now. She met her maternal grandmother for the first time in this really tiny village on the path from Vientiane. You have to go through the mountains all the way to Luang Prabang, in the northern part of Laos. And her grandmother's village was on the way, right? So we connected. Her mother gave us their number. I helped her connect to an uncle who said, we are in this village, this spot. We will wait on the roadside for you. So we stopped there for an afternoon, and she made a video of her reconnecting or meeting her grandmother for the first time. We all cried, right? Everybody cried because grandma was crying. Whether you're Hmong or not, all the students, everybody was in tears, because here she was meeting her grandmother for the first time, and grandma has since passed away. So it's the kinds of for heritage students, that's the impact that it has had for them.
Mhm.
But I would also have to say that I've had many, non-heritage students, white American students and one African American student. They they come back and they tell me it's uncomfortable, right? But I always tell students that if you want comfort, right, if you just want the same comforts that you get here in the United States, then please don't sign up for the program. As one of my students have described, this program is raw, honest, because we're driving through the mountains, we're walking, it's tiresome. But the whole point is that for a lot of the non-heritage students, like I said earlier, they become a minority in the Asian villages, in towns, and it has been really. I have so many wonderful students, but from the 2011 program too, one history student, Graham Anderson, he's one of my. When I think about most impactful, right? He's one of the students who have told me that just being able to work with the students in Laos in the village had helped him decide what he wanted to do after graduation. So experience with the families and villagers allowed him to be brave enough to go to Africa by himself and sign up for, a development program. And that's, he said it was influenced by that experience in Southeast Asia. And then there's many other stories as well, but some kind of stick with you through the last decade. So yeah, that's been kind of the experience that students have had, and every time it's not just for students. I mean, as the faculty leader, even if we're going to the same place that I've been to numerous times, it's always a learning experience for me to share, because I think as faculty members, I know many of my colleagues are wonderful colleagues. They do research abroad all the time, and I know, and how hard it is to organize these programs. It's a lot of work. It's not just when you're abroad, but it's before, during, and after. And when you're traveling abroad with students, many who have never been on a plane before. I've had that. And most had to apply for a passport, right? But many had never been on the plane. For many of them, this first plane ride was an international plane ride across the globe. And that can be scary for students too. But I'm so proud of how brave they are. And as a faculty leader, it is a lot of work. But again, it's not just for the students. It's the ways in which I feel like I grow every time I go as well, because you're not just the professor. You're the teacher. You're the tour guide. You're the mother sometimes too, because students have all kinds of emotional issues when they're abroad, and you become all of. It's the impact on students that makes me continue to do this work.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, it's so invaluable. It's so absolutely invaluable. So, one of the things that, I mean, you had alluded to before about, the tremendous impact, but also how, employers can, they really look for the skills that students gain from study abroad. And I think a huge thing is, critical thinking skills. And, sometimes it seems like an abstract concept to be like, oh, critical thinking skills. But I think that is something that is so study abroad that it
Yeah.
just absolutely happens for you when you're there. And it's not always easy. It's certainly challenging, but it's some of our life's most challenging experiences we get the most out of. And in terms of critical thinking and kind of getting back to a little about what we're experiencing here in the U.S. right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're such a racialized society here in the United States that I really think it can be extremely beneficial with a study abroad experience, getting outside of the United States. It's almost like you can escape that and really see, not that there aren't struggles happening in other countries, but it kind of gives you a different view into course, what's happening in the country that you're in, but then also reflecting back on what's happening in the United States. And, as we had talked about before, going abroad, getting a US passport, really identifying as an American for the first time, not necessarily with your racial identity first, but really as an American, can be extremely powerful for students.
Yeah, it really is. And, the critical thinking, no matter what you do to prepare students, no matter how much assigned readings you have, I mean, some of the students who have had the most meaningful experience in my program have been students who have taken, a classes about the region, or many of them have taken my Hmong history class or my Vietnam War history class, because the class is taught as a history of the region, but history of colonialism and history of U.S. involvement in the region. So those who have taken classes either with myself or others tend to have a better experience, because then they can reflect about it. But those who are reading materials, I mean, it's an academic course, right? So they have to do homework, they have to do reflection papers, and they have to interview people, they have to write a research paper as part of that experience. So it's all the things that you have to do as a student in a class, right? You could be sitting in the class and doing that, or now we're doing the abroad. We're having conversations, we're having class discussions in the plane of jars, or in the train station, or in the square in Hanoi. So I think the thinking, again, you can never prepare people enough, students enough, right? Because no matter, you can do the best job, but things are going to come up and they're going to have to reflect, right? Like, for example, we had a wonderful presentation from a well-known artist in Hanoi this last program that I led in 2018. And the artist was talking about, here's a group of American students, right? The artist was talking about the ways in which, his painting, he paints, it's about the gates, right? And one of his painting was, it was a vagina, right? But really it's talking about the gates and how people enter and all kinds of, he's an artist. And then I had a student who got kind of angry, right? And then she started to say how that was, that was a gender issue, and that she didn't appreciate that. So it's like, here you have an American student kind of analyzing the situation from a very her own position, right? In the United States, placing it into that environment. But then we had a discussion afterwards about why sometimes, when we are in other people's spaces, we are not trying to make them like us. Okay, we are trying to understand their worldviews and their world, and what informs their perspectives. So it's always a learning lesson, like every moment, or going through a subway, metro. It's like you have to really think about your actions and how it's interpreted by others, and then also your own interpretation of what people are asking you. Like, if we're in a village, and the village chief has made this wonderful meal for us, and then some of this will say, "Oh, I'm not hungry, I don't really want to eat." And say, well, that's not appropriate, right? Here you are, special. You're just college students, right? Here we'll just say, oh, you're just college students. But there, they are giving you a VIP treatment for visiting their village. And here you are saying, oh, I'm not hungry, so I don't want to eat. What does that say to the villagers that have made that meal for you? So it's those kinds of things that I think about, and have students reflect about their actions. And I think what's really important is that, given all that's going on now, I mean, they have been going on for a long time, but just even more heightened now than ever before. I think it's so important for our students, American students, to experience other parts of the world. Because more and more we talk about, this is a global society. Even if we think, you know, something that happens in Hong Kong doesn't impact us in Milwaukee, that's not really true, right? And something that happens in, Ghana, you would think, oh, it doesn't impact us, but that's not true, because the world is so interconnected now. And I think we can choose what the future will be for us. We can choose to continue to see ourselves as very, very different from everybody else, and everybody else needs to maybe just be like us, meaning the United States. Or we can be really these global human beings who appreciate, who understand cultural differences, how people see the world, and how we can bridge. And for me, in this small short-term study abroad programs, I really believe that when students become much more aware, for myself too, how I have grown over the course of my life, when you become more knowledgeable about issues across the globe, then I think we can all each play a small role in promoting world peace. I really mean that. And sometimes people say, "Chia, that's for the Secretary of the UN to do, or somebody else." But no, that's not true. That's for you and me, Sharon. That's for our students. Each of us in our daily life, we may be living. My neighbors around me, how can I help to build peace with them too? They might be very different from me, but only different because of the little things that we have on our skin, right? But inside, I mean, we have so much similarity, and I think that if we can learn to appreciate that, we all have a responsibility to make sure that we're treating people equitably. And I feel like the university, we can be there. We can get better. There's so many challenges, but if I look back on my life, Sharon, and think about all the barriers that were put in place for me to not have had the kind of international experience I've had by this age. I won't tell you how old I am, but it's been 28 years since I was a student in Paris. And every day, that 1 year abroad and traveling to 13 different countries, taking a train for 20-hour train from Paris to Prague, all by myself at the age of 20, that year continues to be one of the most defining moments of my life. Even almost every day, I still think about how I survived that, how I made that happen. Speaking about it brings a lot of emotion to me, right? Because it brings me back to the feelings I felt in 12th grade when Mrs. Ruley said, "Oh, you kids couldn't afford that." But at that moment, it's so true. But so this is what I tell our students all the time when they say, "Oh, I don't have the money, I can't do this, I don't have a grandmother to write a check," right? But I said, it is about individual desire too. Okay, the opportunities can be all over sitting there for you, but if you don't take advantage of it, I really believe that a college education, right, and being here in higher education, is that there are many people who will help you, as in my own experience, but they can't help you if you don't help yourself, right? What I mean by that is, don't interpret this as me saying you're responsible for everything. What I'm saying is that when good people give you good advice, take it, right? And there are going to be people who want to help you. If you don't have money, people will find resources to help you, right? And you can take a loan. I had a little bit of loan for my study abroad. It wasn't that my parents couldn't pay for it. They helped me what they could, but I took some loan. But I saw it as an investment in me, that it was the experience I wanted, and so I was going to invest in myself. And whether you're a traditional student like I was, and many of you are, or whether you're a non-traditional student, if you're coming back to school, having kids and, or other family responsibilities, I understand how hard that can be to think about going to study for a semester, a year. It's really difficult. But maybe go on a short-term program, a summer program, invest in yourself, give yourself that experience that no one can give you, right? And once you have it, no one can take it away from you. So study abroad, I still say I'm the biggest advocate for it, because I think it is a really profound experience for everybody. And some people don't have a very good experience, but I come back to say that you get out of it what you put into it. If you go into these, other parts of the world with an open mind to learn and to understand, and even if you don't understand when you come back, at least you can, you embrace the fact that there are differences in how people see the world, how they interact with each other, their values. It's different, but it doesn't mean that it's not as good as ours. It's just different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say that, I mean, we are so lucky to have faculty like you and many others on campus who are dedicated to offering these programs. We are very lucky at UWM to have such a strong group of faculty who will do this, because it really is fantastic for students.
I think so too, and and so the last 6 months have been really hard for me too, Sharon, because I thought about how easy it was, get buy book my flights, get the students ready, and then we go. And then now it's harder, and so I think about how many challenges we are experiencing. But as we open up and opportunities become available for students to go abroad, don't take anything for granted. This is the only time that many of you, like me, now it would be hard for me to take a whole year to just go travel all by myself and be a student, sit in cafes and do nothing and just watch people who are different from me and just be in spaces that are not home to me. Don't take that for granted. And if opportunities open up, just take it and go. And one of the things I'll end by saying that, you know, uh, one of the African American student who went on my program, bless the conversation that she and I had before she put down her $500 deposit. She came to my office and she said, Dr. Vang, and here's where I think it's really relevant to our conversation about racial injustice today, right? She said, Dr. Vang, I'm really serious about going, but um, before I put down my deposit, it's $500. I want to make sure that I feel really good about this. How do you think people will treat Black people there, meaning in Southeast Asia?
Mm-hmm.
And I told this student, I said, her name was Beverly. I said, Beverly, let me tell you that there are jerks in every culture. There really are jerks in every culture, every country, every place. But let me just also tell you that most people aren't jerks. And so when we were in a tiny village, her host mother in the village, we have a few nights of homestay in northern Laos. Her host mother, Beverly, was the first Black person that the village had ever met. And they loved her, and her host mother just said, you are my daughter, come back and visit me. And I'm sure Beverly will probably tell you the same story, but it just kind of helped to break down those assumptions that we have about other parts of the world too. So even though they've never met anybody like her, they didn't treat her any differently from the other students. And she just loved it, and she came back. Uh, Based on what she's told me, she had a really positive experience. And that's what I want all of us to challenge ourselves. I was an American student at the age of 21 studying in Paris, but because of the ways in which the world kind of sees America as Black and white, I was not always automatically seen as American. Okay, until I have to go through customs and I have my US passport. So that's different. People don't usually start speaking to me in English. People usually start to saying ni hao or konnichiwa to me instead of hello, how are you? So it's really interesting. It helps you to reflect about your identity, race, and how you see the world, but also how the world sees you. So I hope that you all will take advantage of this. And Sharon, when this is all over, I hope to take more students to Southeast Asia and just introduce them to all the wonderful things that are there.
Yes, well, that would be fantastic. And yes, as I mentioned to you before, I said that we should start a campaign for students to wear masks so they can study abroad, right?
Yes, let's do that, because over there, many of them already wear masks before all of this. So I think we're going to come out of this good if we choose to work together to make this a better place. And again, that international education is the topic of our discussion, but it's a topic every day in the world. So I hope that we'll be able to give more students an opportunity. I hope that students who are first generation like myself, or students like myself from underrepresented groups, you come to this campus, it's your you have a right to have access to all of these wonderful opportunities. So if you think you have certain barriers, talk to Sharon, talk to the study abroad office, talk to me, talk to other faculty member, and we will find a way to support you if that's what you want to do for yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time today. And thanks to everybody who will watch this. And yes, please contact us for more information. The Study Abroad website is studyabroad.uwm.edu. And Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.